Hi, I'm Grace Judson, and I am here on this video today to talk with you a little bit about what I call professional empathy. And the reason I call it that is because I think that many people, very understandably, get a little uncomfortable or sort of squinchy about the idea of empathy in the workplace. And as I say, that is very understandable because what we typically think of as empathy is the kind of emotional support and the emotional connection that we would have with a close friend or a family member who's going through a hard time. And that is perfectly reasonably and legitimately not what we would really want to do in the office. However, empathy is a very important leadership skill. It's a very important professional skill. And here's why. It is because as we work with people, the more we can understand them, why they might have the types of reactions that they have, how they might respond to the way we ask them to do something or ask a question of them, how they might respond to certain types of workplace demands, workplace requirements, whatever you want to call it, how they might respond in a negotiation, how they might respond in a conflict. Empathy helps us understand all of these things and therefore work with the person in a way that they can receive, and you will get far better results. Okay, so let's take this one step further then. If you're with me on that, then let's look at what I call the 3 levels of empathy. And I've written about this, and I've also written about the reason why I'm not a big fan of what I call the first level of empathy, which is that tried and true saying, I hear you. All too often, what I hear you, which is something that we are taught to say in order to demonstrate that we have been listening, that we understand what's going on, but all too often, what it's actually used for is, okay, I hear you saying stuff, but I really want to make my point now. And the other thing that I will say about I hear you is that I hear a lot of things. And in fact, you may have heard a couple of thumps a minute ago because my cat jumped up on my desk and then jumped down on the floor. Well, I heard that, but was I paying attention to it? Not really. You might have heard it, and hopefully you were listening to what I was saying, and so you didn't really pay attention to it either. So my point is that we hear a lot of things that we don't necessarily pay any attention to. And that's where the danger with I hear you as a way of demonstrating that we have been paying attention to what someone is saying. It's where it can get a little dangerous. Okay, a little insincere, I'll say. So the next level of empathy is what I call I understand you. And if we can demonstrate that we understand the person, not just by saying I hear you and not just by saying the words I understand you, but by actually through the things that we say, the way that we respond to what they're doing, what they're saying, how they're saying it, we can demonstrate that we understand what's going on for them. We will start to build a connection from which we are far more likely to be able to influence behavior and get closer to the goals or the objectives that we may have. There are a number of techniques for this. I teach them in my online program. I'm not going to go into a great deal of depth about that right now because then this will become its own online program, and I just really want to touch on the high points here. But if you can find ways of helping somebody feel understood, you will go a long way to being a leader that your employees look up to and respect and want to do well for. The third level of empathy is what I call I feel you. And this is starting to move into the territory of personal empathy. Not the kind of empathy that you might necessarily be demonstrating or want to use in the office. I feel you is a way, I mean, you would not, again, say to somebody, well, wow, I feel you. But it is the point at which you start demonstrating that you really get the emotional reactions the emotional experiences that they are having. And it's really where people want to be in their relationships. It is the highest point. So, of course, it's the highest point on my little three-level triangle or pyramid. It's where people want to be in their relationships, but really more where they want to be in their personal relationships, because it is also a vulnerable space, and we don't necessarily want to reach that level of vulnerability in the office. So I hear you. Be careful with it, because it can come across as insincere and authentic, kind of checking the box of what you're supposed to say. I understand you finding ways to really demonstrate that you get where the person is coming from. And then I feel you, which is the third level that people really are not necessarily going to enter into necessarily in the workplace, or at least only in a very small way. I want to say one more thing about I understand you. And that is another trap that people sometimes fall into, which is that understanding somebody does not necessarily mean agreeing with them. And we often, especially in a conflict or in a negotiation, we will often get stuck in our own little bubble of this is what I want, this is what I need, and not find a way to connect and have that sense of understanding with the other person. And part of that is because I think there's an underlying fear that if we do get to that level of understanding, we might suddenly start agreeing with them and no longer have the motivation or drive to go for what we really want and need. And that is not actually true, okay? That is a dangerous thing to get trapped in, because it means that we don't take the steps that are necessary to create the kinds of connection with the other person that are needed in order to influence them. Emotional connection, professional empathy, is really necessary in order to have the kind of influence that people need to have, that you need to have as a leader, in order to really motivate, inspire, and get your people to do the things that you need them to do and that they need to do for their careers without resistance, and while being fully engaged with what it is that they are doing and the work that needs to get done. So there you have it. The three levels of empathy and the difference between personal and professional empathy, and why understanding does not automatically imply that you're going to start agreeing with them, or that you will not be able to maintain your perspective on the situation. If you like this video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please leave a comment on this video. You know, that always helps other people find it. And also, come on over to my website and take a look around. There are a lot of resources over there, and the link is right up there. Take care.